The modern game was structured with the forging of three distinct and identifiable formats: Test, ODI, and 2020 cricket. For within each unique format, differing qualities of the game were prioritized to cater for a variety of playing and viewing styles. Within this, cricket existed in a period of peace, but they were not always alone. In the time before 2020 cricket, in the minds of broadcasters and cricket boards in the 1990s, alternative game modes were forged in an attempt to find the third generation of cricket formats. One by one, international games of cricket with 4 stumps, touchdown zones, and outfields made out of sand were appearing on television screens across the world. Never had there been a more confusing time to be a cricket fan. Because of this though, the games did not last, slowly fading into obscurity, forgotten forever. They are known as the lost formats of cricket. New Zealand, 1996. Being the first solid attempt at remodeling the game since World Series cricket 15 years earlier, you could forgive Cricket Max if it treaded lightly on changes. But that's not the approach the game's inventor, New Zealand international Martin Crowe, had at the time. On immediate viewing, the game itself is barely recognisable within the ground, with new pitch lines shaping out a double your scored touchdown zone behind the bowler's end, a trapezoid inner green zone repositioning the shape of the field itself, and a significantly thinner pitch positioned to change the way bowlers approach the crease. Players wore shorts, and an extra stump was added to give the bowlers 4 to aim at. Martin Crowe said he wanted a faster paced and more visually appealing game to be played, and that's exactly what he did with Cricket Max.
Maybe we don't really know enough about it yet, but we can see there's big promise of it.
The game was structured essentially as a shortened and more flamboyant form of test match cricket mixed in with the match length of 2020 cricket, with teams going out to bat for 2 sets of 10 overs each, equating to 4 innings in total match length. 2 extra balls were also added at the end of each over, making a full over 8 balls long. These intervals between innings were treated as quarter time breaks, and the game was meant to last no longer than 3 hours, as Cricket Max marketed itself as a quicker and more chopped up version of the game that would more closely resemble the structure of other popular sports at the time. Each player was assigned a specific position, with the initial rules of the game outlining each team requiring 3 specialist batsmen, 2 all-rounders, 3 bowlers, 1 specialist keeper, and 4 specialist fielders. Only 5 players would bat, and only 5 would bowl. The 2 all-rounders would split their duties between the 2. Only 11 would take to the field though, as 2 of the specialist fielders would act as substitutes and could be brought on to replace an existing bowler, but only in the last 10 overs of the final innings of the game. On the surface, this rigid structure to player positions is peculiar and confusing, as it removed flexibility from team sheets and only added to the complication of understanding an unconventional sport like cricket to new fans. But these changes were added for a reason, and that's because Cricket Max intended on having the best players playing in their preferred positions out of the middle for the most amount of time in the game. This was in a bid to improve the game's quality from both a sporting and entertainment perspective. One way this was achieved was by changing the understanding of dismissals. Only 5 players would bat per innings, split between the 3 specialist batsmen and 2 all-rounders. So when one of these players would get out, instead of that being the end of his day, he would actually drop down to the bottom of that batting order and would be able to have another go once the remaining batsmen above him were dismissed. This meant there was no tail end, as bowlers didn't have to bat. This didn't mean that the team had unlimited wickets though, as once the team got dismissed 9 times, the last batsman would go out there and bat alone, with a runner taking up the non-striker's end. Once that 10th wicket was taken though, the team would finally officially be dismissed. Scoring was changed up too. A 50-meter touchdown-like area, known as a max zone, was painted to the end of the field behind the bowler's end. If a player hit the ball into this area, their score for that shot would be doubled. If they hit the ball into the air on the full in that area and were caught in the zone, it wouldn't count as being out either. No fielder was allowed to start standing within that zone at the time of delivery. If a player hit 3 consecutive 4s in a row while out batting, it'll count as an 8 as well.
Well, he draws this one. Tuffy can't believe it. Gave himself some room inside edge and all.
Each batsman had pressure to score quickly, as if they were at a strike rate of under 0.8 runs a ball from their first 25 balls, they were struck out and would be dismissed for failing to reach their required strike rate. Extras were changed up too, as wides now equated to 2 extra runs as opposed to 1 in the traditional game, and free hits were experimented for the first time after a no ball was bowled. Batsmen weren't the only ones with their work changed up, as bowlers had a new look pitch to deal with. The pitch was cut down in width, and a 4th stump was added to give bowlers a bigger wicket to aim at, as Cricket Max ripped LBW from the rulebook. Oh, how Shane Watson would have loved Cricket Max. The first game of Cricket Max was played out in February 1996, with former legends of the game from around the world coming together for a great spectacle to be played out on New Zealand national television. From 1996 to 2002, 7 domestic Cricket Max seasons were played out in New Zealand. Throughout this time, the game was modified and rules were changed as Cricket Max attempted to adapt its game structure and become cricket's 3rd generation of game. Cricket Max wasn't the only game competing for this title though, as Australia's take on the short form game, Super 8s were being played out domestically just across the Tasman, a league I will go into details in part 2 of this series with. As the 2 series competed on in the 90s, like Packers' war in the traditional game, they eventually came to the recognition they both were attempting to achieve the same goals, and in 1998 combined rulebooks to create the Super Max 8s for an international cricket tournament to be played in Malaysia. Temporarily endorsed by the ICC, it appeared cricket had found its 3rd generation. But the game was brought down in 2002 as New Zealand players protested and delayed the start of their domestic summer with a strike against their national cricket board. Players demanded a 60% pay increase, but the board would not budge. The 2002 Cricket Max season was suspended and never returned to screens again. When all thought was gone though, Cricket Max was given a farewell game, with 1 official international fixture being played out that summer between India and New Zealand to give this game mode an opportunity to say goodbye. Tendulkar famously hit 72 runs off 27 balls, largely helped by the Cricket Max zone. But it wasn't enough, as New Zealand won the game by 21 runs. And that was it. The game has yet to be seen since. 20 years has passed since the last Cricket Max game was played. It has been lost to history. While the game mode never took off as it once intended and is now assigned to the history books, Cricket Max laid the foundations for the creation of the short form game that you see in cricket today. From inventing the free hit following a no ball, to showcasing how brave and bold innovations could create an exciting and new way of looking at cricket, it was the spark that 2020 cricket needed. The following season after the death of Cricket Max, the first game of 2020 cricket will be played, and that is not a coincidence. What this shows is that the success of 2020 cricket wasn't a fluke, as it wasn't cricket's first attempt at short form, but rather a successful amalgamation of game modes made before. This is the first part of a new series I'm creating into the lost formats of cricket. Tune into part 2 to find out what other game modes have been lost in the multiverse of alternative cricket game modes. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.